Hi everyone, this is Marco Fujimura from my studio in Princeton, and today I'd like to do a second digest form of All Saints Church Forum on Faith and Life. And we had two artists as our guests recently. One is artist RoMa, who has been not only doing her work in her apartment in Princeton to create works in memory of some loved ones, but also she is heading up a ministry, Grief Ministries, which seems so important to me in our time that we have a place to lament, with a place to gather in our sorrows, to direct them to God. And I so appreciate that ministry that she has, which she has been trained to do. But also, as I visited her studio, I realized that there was this deep connection between her art and this journey of healing. And the other artist I was privileged to interview recently was an actress, Eryn LeCroy, who actually is a sister of Addison LeCroy, who assisted me for many years. And green panels that you see in the back as I interviewed her is a direct result of Addison's hard work to help me to not only install these pieces, but she, as a photographer, has been and journeying with me to document some of my work here in the studio. My next book out of Yale Press, called Art Is: A Journey into the Light, uses some of her photos, and I hope to share about that project with you soon. I'm often asked, what is art? Right? How do you define that? Is that if you're a professional artist, it might be a little bit easier to create a category of, well, you make a living as an artist, or you have a gallery that represents your work. But in writing my recent book, I came to this definition that art is simply awareness. That's a very general definition, but I think it is important to me that art is not just the transactional marketplace definition, but it is who we are as human beings, created to be creative. And therefore, when we paint, when we dance, when we write songs, when we create theater, that there is something profoundly true about the presence that we bring into that act of making. So in interviewing these two artists, I have asked them about the process of their journeys. And RoMa, as a visual artist, has a particular way of entering into her making. And Eryn LeCroy, who is a Broadway star. She was the Christine on Phantom of the Opera, which was her dream to play that role, to sing as Christine. And I asked them both about the process of how they got to where they are today.
Well, I started making art I've always made art. I've always done collages and doodles and stuff like that. But I think that I got much deeper into my art when I started with grief work and my own loss of my own family members and my own alienation and loneliness and whatever. And I began to do more art more often. So I would paint every day instead of whenever I had 5 minutes. And so the art that I made was just simply an expression of where I was at that particular moment.
So RoMa, starts with a circle. And that's so interesting to me, that circle is the beginning of life, of art for her. And that out of that circle, this entirely new generative process begins for her. And I wonder for many of us, by the way, RoMa is not a trained artist. She never went to art school, but she obviously has great facility with her visual language and materials. But what impressed me the most is the accessibility that she has to others to join her. And oftentimes she would invite other people, not just artists, but people to join her in her act of making. And that invitation and hospitality is, to me, a true gift of awareness that she is bringing into the world. And so it's not just her work, but it's her being that is, to me, a beautiful artwork of God, and how she brings that into a community here at All Saints Princeton is notable, because a lot of times we, even in the church, we can become very transactional. As artists, we want people to know about our art, and we often will even try to market our art there. And I am one of those people who don't think there's not anything wrong with that, except that when it becomes only that trying to get people's attention so that we can market our work, that can become something other than the art that I'm talking about. And so I asked Eryn specifically about that journey of doing something that she clearly loved. She always wanted to be a singer. She actually wanted to be Christine. And she tells us of that story right here.
But this is a leather-bound notebook with a phantom mask on it. I found it at a Christmas market in New York City, and I purchased it when I was 17. And I prayed, and I said, God, in faith, I'm going to buy this, but I'm going to put it away, and I'm going to save it, and trust that one day you will open the door for me to perform in Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. And when I get that opportunity, I'm going to write prayers and stories about my time in that show in this journal. So my mom tells me that I started singing as soon as I could talk, which was really young. So when I was about 5 years old, my parents and my grandmother took me to my very first live performance and live theatrical performance. It was the national tour of Beauty and the Beast at the Texas State Fair. And we sat way up in the nosebleed section, and I remember my family had brought a set of binoculars. And once I had those binoculars in my hand, I didn't let them go. I was completely mesmerized by what was happening on stage. And you have to understand, up until that point, the only kind of entertainment I had ever seen was behind a screen on a TV. So the fact that there were live performers in front of me singing was mind-blowing to me. And it was from that point on that all I ever wanted to do was perform. So fast forward a few more years, I moved to New York City in 2015, and one of my very first auditions was for Phantom of the Opera. And I ended up auditioning for the show over a span of 3 years. It's a pretty rigorous audition process. You audition for the casting director, and then if they're interested, you'll get more opportunities to audition for different members of the creative team. So I auditioned. Finally, in 2018, my agents called me and they said, so you have another audition for Phantom of the Opera for the Broadway production. And I said, okay. So I go in and I audition. The next day, they call me And they said, so you have a final callback at the Majestic Theater for Hal Prince. And I went, oh my goodness, this is it. If it doesn't happen now, it's not going to happen. And so that was 2 weeks later. Well, I have to tell you, the 2 weeks leading up to that audition, I actually went through a really hard time. I went through a valley. I unexpectedly lost a dear friend from college to cancer. I was working 3 jobs at the time to pay the bills, and I got really sick and just couldn't get better because I was working really hard. And I also had to move apartments in those 2 weeks leading up to the audition. So I show up at my audition at the Majestic Theater, and I remember praying this prayer because I still wasn't well physically. I was grieving the loss of my friend. Before I stepped out on stage, I said, God, only you can do this. You have to sing through me, is what I prayed. And at the time, I didn't even really know what that meant. I just said, you have to sing through me. I need your strength, and I need your voice in this moment, because I don't fully know what's going to come out of my mouth when I sing. So I step out on stage, I sing Think of Me. It went well, but I had to completely rely on the strength of the Lord. So that audition is done. My agents call me. They said, well, Hal gave you a thumbs up. I said, okay, good. What now? And they said, well, he's sending your tapes with 2 other women to Andrew Lloyd Webber and Cameron McIntosh, who will review these tapes, and then they will decide who's going to play the role. But they said it may be 2 to 4 weeks before we hear anything. And then you go, gosh, what do you do in the waiting when you're waiting for an opportunity that could change the trajectory of your career? How do you hold that? How do you trust God in that time, knowing that this may or may not happen, and either way, God is good? That was hard. So 2 weeks later, my agents call me, ask me to come to their office for what I think is a completely unrelated reason. They surprise me. They say, Eryn, you're going to make your Broadway debut as Christine Daae in The Phantom of the Opera. And that was on, remember the date I told you to remember, that was on September 20th, 2018. That was, 13 years or so after I had seen the show in London on September 20th. And I just think God is in the details. And so his grace to be in the small detail of something like that, like a date, was just a reminder to me of his faithfulness.
And so after Eryn was able to successfully launch her career and accomplish the dream that she had since childhood, which is a remarkable journey. But then you realize that you're given that platform, and an opportunity may open up that oftentimes I notice that artists and especially actors struggle to take advantage of or to walk into that path, which is being someone that other people see you as a resource, or someone that you are willing to journey with. And here's what Eryn had to say about meeting someone like that.
So, I'll share. So one memory I have when I made my Broadway debut in Phantom, I had a lot of people tell me, because you're thinking through so many things. I had 3 weeks of rehearsal leading up to my debut. Okay, so it's really not a lot of time given how big of a role Christine is. My stage manager pulled me aside right before I went on stage, and he said, hey, most people, are just so focused on what they're doing in the show, they kind of forget to pause and have a moment somewhere in the show where they really take everything in. And he said, I just want to encourage you to find that moment in this show and let it resonate with you, almost like you're taking a photograph in your mind, you know, something that you never forget. And I'm so glad he did that. Because, you know, you've got nerves, and I probably had 30 people that had come to see me in my Broadway debut. You're thinking through so many things. So that moment for me that I will never forget was when Christine is in the boat when they're singing the title song, The Phantom of the Opera. We're coming down center stage, and I get an opportunity to look out at the audience and take in the lair that's all around me. And I went, it makes me emotional. Wow, I'm the girl in the boat that I had always dreamt of being. And I got to take that in and, you know, on the inside of my heart, give gratitude to God. I want to give him glory in all things. And that's a special memory that I'll never forget. Another aspect of that journey, I had mentioned before about prayer. Prayer is so important. It's so powerful. I'm reminded of Ephesians 6 that says our battle is not against flesh and blood, but it's against the spiritual forces of darkness. And I think especially in a place like the theater industry, prayer, God can move so powerfully through prayer. And so I had some incredible experiences with God, both backstage and on stage with prayer. I would try to arrive at the theater early so I could pray over the space and pray over my company before the shows would start. And then there's a moment on stage when the Phantom is singing the beautiful song, The Music of the Night. Christine stands there, so I get to stand there and just listen to this beautiful music, but it's a moment where I get to be still and take a moment and pause. And I turn out to the audience, and one day during a show, I thought, I should just take this moment and pray over the audience. I don't know what these people might be going through, but the Holy Spirit can move. And so, unbeknownst to my fellow actor who's playing the Phantom and is singing Music of the Night, I'm standing there listening to him sing, but also looking out at the audience, and I'm just praying prayers over the audience, prayers of blessing, prayers of healing, prayers of favor. I have one little story based off of that. During the pandemic, I had someone reach out to me on social media. They said, hey, my sister is dying of terminal brain cancer, and she has a bucket list, and one of her bucket list items is to meet you. And I went, oh, okay, well, I'd be happy to meet her. We get on a Zoom call. She lived overseas. And she said, I just have to thank you. And I said, thank me for what? You know, what did I do? And she said, shortly after I was diagnosed with this brain cancer, my mom and I traveled to New York. We had had this plan for a while to come see the Phantom of the Opera. She said, at that point, I was in a lot of pain. And I got to the theater, we're sitting in the audience, enjoying the show. She said, the moment you came out and started singing, my pain went away. And I had no more pain the entire rest of the show. And she said, your voice was healing to me in that moment. And I said, well, I don't know what you believe, but I follow Jesus, and I believe in his healing power. And there's a moment in the show where I pray over audience members, and I don't know how God is going to use that, but you sharing that with me is so encouraging to me, to know that he's literally using my singing voice as a vessel to bring healing. That made such an impact on my life, and it just, I think, is a constant reminder to me of there's no limit to what our God can do. What's called Creative NYC At our church, Mako and Hejin were just there last weekend. We had a creative conference. And this is something that has been developed over the last few years, but I spoke with the director of Creative NYC, which is a portion of the church that brings Christian creatives together. We seek to renew culture through the arts with a redemptive edge. So I met with him and his wife, and they are hoping to develop a discipleship program through the arts, like a mentorship program. So we were talking about what that could look like and possibilities for me to step into even more mentorship with young performers who are coming to New York. That's really important to me and something I'm really passionate about, because there are so many voices that pull at you in New York City, especially as a young person, and you're so impressionable when you move to New York. And there's also a lot of voices that pull at you in the arts. And it is so important to me that young people, especially those who know Jesus, when they're coming to New York and they want to pursue the arts, that they have a mentor to turn to and a mentor to look up to. So that is something that I'm really passionate about.
So Eryn finds herself, I think, in a very unique position, even on Broadway, that her faith has been integrated. And going back to RoMa, to me, her art, as well as her life and actually her whole apartment, is an invitation for anyone to walk into that process, particularly of grieving. And for us today, there are not too many places where we can do that. You see, when art becomes merely transactional or even a power game of success, you begin to lose that element of interfacing with life's most precious moments, getting married or going to a memorial service. These are sacred transitions that we have. And it used to be that art was a portal through which you could celebrate these passages of our life journeys. But today, that's not even thought about, because it has become purely, perhaps in some cases, transactional. And it has become a way to transgress against normative conventions, create something so-called new, which may last a couple of years, but nevertheless, it is a game of one-upmanship to claim that territory of ideas or art that is unique to that person in that transactional market realm. And it does not have the relevance and resonance with a total human way of life to death, of journeying through those transitions. And what I found RoMa's work incredible is that she has created a portal for that. And we are able to participate in that together. So she speaks about this particular work that she did in such a context.
I wasn't doing it for anybody. I was just trying to get something out, you know. I think when you're grieving, so much is pushed in and down, and you're trying to just hold it together and just hang on. And it needed to come out. And for me, it came out through art. And yeah.
So this is one of the pieces that
anybody visiting her can see. Tell us about this.
Well, when my husband died, I was painting at my kitchen table, and I've never been trained in art, so I start with an empty page. I have never known what's going to show up. So what showed up was this spaceman in the circle there, going through a chasm of dark and stark and pointy mountains on either side, and kind of dark colors, and you couldn't figure out where he was going. And that's how I felt. I felt like I was in this capsule and I was going somewhere, but it was a strange world. I had nowhere in mind. I didn't know where I was going to end up or where I was going. And so through the years, I've painted the spaceman probably a dozen times. You'll even see it on the front of one of the books that's going around. Oh, the spaceman was there when I first drew the first circle.
Oh, okay.
And I drew the little person in the corner, which is me, basically. I've always fantasized myself as about a 9-year-old girl. And so she's going, whoa, there's this spaceman. And it's the first time I've ever put another being or person or anything in the spaceman picture, which was kind of a breakthrough for me.
Thank you for joining me in this digest form of faith and life conversations. We are going to have a few more of these throughout this year. If you'd like to join us either online or in person, we are located in Princeton, All Saints Church. All you have to do is look that up. It will come up. Come join us Sundays at 9 o'clock is usually the time. But if you go to the church website, which I will post here, there will be every week, there will be updates. So may your wings expand, and may our wings be used to help us journey into new creation.